In An Unhurried Leader, I wrote that I've often been tempted to prove something about myself through the work that I do. I behave as though my value is uncertain and needs to be earned or achieved. But to use theological categories, my worth is more a matter of grace than it is a matter of works. That sort of insecurity has been a major driver of hurry in my life. I wonder if you can identify. Welcome to the Unhurried Living Podcast. Did you know that you could join a community of listeners to this podcast who are hungry to grow deeper in the unhurried way of Jesus? There's nothing quite like having a group of like-minded friends with whom to share the journey. We call this group Unhurried Leaders. And in 2024, we are going through my new book, A Non-Anxious Life, in a monthly live Zoom to talk about how to live in the unhurried way of God's peace. We have 4 years of archived monthly recordings that can resource your spiritual journey. I'd love to have you join this growing online community of men and women. It's one of my most encouraging hours every month. To learn more and to join this group, please visit unhurriedliving.com/unhurriedleaders. That's unhurriedliving.com/unhurriedleaders. That's all one word. Welcome to the podcast. If you're new here, I'm glad you've found us. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing so you won't miss an episode. As I said at the top, insecurity has been a major driver of hurry in my life and my leadership along the way. I've imagined that my value is uncertain and needs to be proven through doing impressive things. But my value as a person is given to me by my Father in heaven. The jury is not out deliberating about this. The Father has already determined that He loves us and delights in us as daughters and sons who belong to Him. But so often we still find ourselves trying to find something in our work that only God can give us. Insecurity like that is a major motor for hurry. It can drive us to frantic activity that drains us, frenetic activity that wearies us. It makes such a difference when we bring holy confidence and joy to our work. Again, we are mistaken when we imagine that our worth is hanging in the balance of how well we perform. In a scenario like this, if you've had a productive and successful week, you matter. If you've had a bad week, an unproductive week, a week that feels way more like failure than success, you can feel worthless. But in the kingdom of God, we bring worth to our work rather than finding worth in our work. We express our value through what we do rather than establishing our value through what we do. This has been a paradigm shift for me, and it's one I'm still making. Let me remind you, because I've said this in so many ways before on this podcast, your identity is a gift you've already received rather than a paycheck you have to earn week after week after month after month. Early on in An Unhurried Leader, I wrote that, quote, "My leadership has sometimes been a frantic attempt to establish some sense of an identity I feel I don't yet possess. I'm seeking a God-honoring way of leading that is fueled by a secure sense of the value and identity I have in Him. But I've too often found myself leading from a place of unholy dissatisfaction rather than from a place of holy satisfaction." End quote. Leading from insecurity puts pressure on those I serve. I'm communicating, no matter how subtle it is, that I need something from them. I communicate that I need them to be impressed by me. I need their wow. By the way, insecurity doesn't always look timid or tentative. Often, especially in leaders, Insecurity is expressed in overstatement or overperformance or showy self-expression. Whenever I find myself seeking to impress others, you can bet that insecurity is in some way at the root of that activity. At my best, I am free from needing anyone else's wow. The affection of my Father in heaven, given rather than earned, is all I need. And I already have access to that now before I do one impressive thing. The delight of God over me is measureless. When I've struggled to trust God's words of love and pleasure over me, I find myself looking to just about anyone or anything else to prove or even to earn some sense of I matter. And most of the time, I don't realize that this is what I'm doing. This is one of the reasons why spiritual disciplines of disengagement are so important for leaders. They help us grow in greater self-awareness. They train us in noticing what's happening in us right in the middle of the busyness that surrounds us. When I regularly practice solitude and silence, for example, there is no one there to impress with my presence or my words. There is no one from whom I can seek approval. There is only God, and God is not waiting for me to impress him. He already knows all there is to know about me. He already knows my successes and my failures. He already knows my good work and my bad. He knows me fully, and he embraces me as I am. There is a potent line in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16 that I've come to love. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. Knowing the love of God can too easily stop at just knowing about God's love. It's a verse we've memorized, or it's a teaching we've heard, or it's an idea we agree with, at least in theory. But John says that he had come to know and rely on the love of God for him. Relying goes deeper. It involves confident experience. God's love can become rooted and established in us. Relying on God's love becomes a foundation for who we are and what we do. It produces a holy security that displaces insecurity in us. Knowing and relying on the love of God for us changes everything, inside and out. Now, in my own experience, insecurity has more often made me timid than brash or self-promoting. So it's been important for me to lean into my insecurities rather than avoiding what makes me feel timid. Avoiding what provokes insecurity has not been a good move for me. Insecurity accommodated tends to expand it instead of reduce it. Insecurity has me looking to my work to get something, but working from security in Christ enables me to come to work to give something. The difference is profound, even if it's hard sometimes to discern. The other day, in a podcast interview, I was asked this question: what is something you think you need that you don't actually need? My answer was more fame. I'm an author. Most of us who write books would like more people to know about our books and read them. There's nothing wrong with that. We work on marketing and publicity. That's a key element of the work of being an author. But fame? That's a different thing. That's about having more and more people not only know about you, but also more and more people liking you. Doesn't that sound a bit insecurity-driven? If my identity is rooted in fame, how much fame will satisfy me? won't I always be able to point to someone who has more of it than me? And won't that drive me to seek more and more of it? Fame solves insecurity like salt water quenches thirst. It doesn't. More fame usually drives insecurity deeper. Having the good opinion of a lot of people doesn't actually change anything about me. If many people appreciate a book I've written, I can just say thank you. It's a gift. But if I need lots of people to like a book I've written, then I've stepped onto a trap. That sort of fame is subject to the law of diminishing returns. And you don't have to be any kind of a public figure to want more people to like you. Social media is obviously built on a common longing to be liked. I mean, the most basic positive response to a social media post is a like. There's a great difference between enjoying likes on your posts and needing them. Assuming that the likes that others add to your social posts are essential to your well-being will put you on a treadmill that is steadily running faster and faster. So, in case I haven't made it clear enough yet how insecurity drives hurry, let me just say it bluntly. If you have to keep doing impressive things to prove yourself, you'll have to do more and more impressive things over time. An identity that you have to prove is subject, as I said, to the law of diminishing returns. You have to do more and more, bigger and better, to get the same identity hit that you got before with less. I've called this the identity treadmill. You can walk on it at 3 miles an hour. You can jog on it at 5. You can sprint on it at 12 miles an hour, but eventually you just can't run any faster. You can't do any more. For some of us, this becomes a source of burnout. For others, it can provoke a kind of midlife crisis. But these painful experiences might be a gift if they awaken us to the reality that what we were painfully trying to earn was something God had already given us. Let me end our time together by asking a simple question. How do you know if insecurity is driving hurry in your life? Well, one way to discern the answer to this question is basic. Insecurity and true prayer are at odds with one another. Humility and prayer are longtime friends, but not insecurity and prayer. In An Unhurried Leader, I wrote about why I sometimes struggle in prayer. Quoting, "I've come to discover that my struggle in prayer tends to correspond to the degree that I am seeking to establish my identity through the things I do and through what others say about me. This me is what Brennan Manning, in his book Abba's Child, called the imposter. And this imposter often tries to take responsibility and credit for my leadership roles." End quote. Let me share an extended description of the imposter as Brennan Manning describes him. He says, "Obviously, the imposter is antsy in prayer. He hungers for excitement, craves some mood-altering experience. He is depressed when deprived of the spotlight. The false self is frustrated because he never hears God's voice. He cannot, since God sees no one there. Prayer is death to every identity that does not come from God. The false self flees silence and solitude because they remind him of death." End quote. So I've come to recognize in my own experience that when I'm struggling with prayer, when I'm resisting the regular practice of prayer, it's often a time when this imposter has been operating as my primary identity. Only an identity rooted in something real and God-given can really pray. If I'm awake enough, I realize my level of resistance to prayer is a warning light on the dashboard of my leadership, making me aware of this misplaced sense of identity. Resistance to connecting with God is a sign that I don't really believe that my value is rooted in God, but it's instead hiding out there somewhere for me to find and achieve. That little line from 1 John would be a good thing to keep in the back of your mind, perhaps as a question. How am I coming to know and more deeply rely on God's love for me? In what ways might insecurity be driving me to grab for something I actually already have in God? Remember, you are already valued by the one whose perspective matters most. Take that with you as you engage your life, your relationships, and your work. You've been listening to the Unhurried Living Podcast. Join me next time to learn more about following the genius of Jesus' unhurried way of life and leadership.